G'day everyone, Alex here, and welcome to episode 153 of the Trademate Sports Betting Podcast. As you can see, I'm joined by pro sports bettor Neel Shah. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. How you doing?
Very, very well, mate. All the happier that you're here, mate. It's been too long since we've done a little show together.
Has
How's
been a
life
while.
been treating you, mate?
Yeah, no, it's been all right. It's much the same. Just busy betting away. In the industry now as well, so getting kind of an inside perspective on things. Just gearing up for the World Cup. Looking forward to that.
You're in the industry, mate. Do you want to share how far in the industry you are, or we're gonna keep that nice and quiet?
Not very far. I'm just sort of a lowly underling, but that's kind of the way I like it. Just kind of quietly, just picking up a pension and getting some useful info, but still, very much doing my own stuff as well, in between.
Yep. Well, I think last time we talked, you were just getting your channel underway. Maybe you'd already started. Maybe you hadn't. Maybe you were just about to start. I can't really remember. But yeah. How's that all been going?
Yeah, no, it's been really good. So yes, I've been sort of running a group since May, just kind of sharing my sort of tips and selections. It's been like completely free all this time. I don't know when this pod's going to be going out. There'll be a couple of weeks left, but then it'll be kind of a paid service from November. So it's been good. I think we're about 70 points up since May. Some nice wins in there. It's been really good. Really lovely community that we have in there as well, and lots of sort of smart, helpful people. If you're interested, feel free to sort of reach out on Twitter. I'll sort of be sending some info out in the next couple of weeks as well.
If people want to join the channel, I assume go to Twitter or something like that. You got it in your Twitter bio, or
So all the information will be on Twitter. It's through a company called Bettor. So they kind of handle all the kind of admin side of stuff. Because I'm not very good at that side of things. They'll do all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if you're interested, just feel free to reach out on Twitter and send me a message or have a look at one of the links.
good stuff, mate. Well, today we are going to be doing something I've been thinking of quite a while, and you mentioned it to me too. But part of my, or maybe not these days, but especially when I was working for Trademate full time, part of my treat of my daily exercise was having a look at the YouTube comments, replying to people every day. Most of the time, it's quite good, but some of the time there's some exciting comments in there. And I think about maybe a month ago, or maybe a little bit less, I tweeted out one of my favorites of all time that got commented that I found. It was months ago. I'm trying to. I think it was this one actually. I'll get it up in a second. But I thought the tweet became reasonably popular, at least for me, and I thought, this would be a pretty decent podcast to go through some of the comments that we've got on the YouTube channel and some of the tweets you've sent to me too. And we can debunking's maybe not the right word, but we can just go through them. We're not gonna sit here and give these people a load of crap, but at least
that's what I wanted to do, but Alex wanted to be sort of kinder about it.
Yeah, we can do that, but at the same time, I don't want to alienate people. I think it'd be helpful because there may be people listening to this thinking the exact same thing. So we could potentially help some people out, explain certain things, why there's certain things in videos or things said or whatever. And maybe we can provide some education out of this rather just ripping people a new one.
If you say so.
All right. Well, I'll play good cop, and Neel's clearly going to play bad cop here. But I'm going to try and keep some relationships in the world. All right, number one here. Hopefully, you guys can see. If you're not watching on YouTube, I'll try and read these out. But I've blocked out the photos and the names just so it's not a bullying session here. He goes, bro, you can't win if you're trying to build your own system or model and try to beat the bookies with it. They have PhD guys working for them, computer specialists, and a lot of smart guys behind. You can't. My advice is never go against the odds. Follow the favorites. Try to confirm their favoritism and bet. It's the only way. Stop with this nonsense of value betting. You cannot calculate the true probability of an event, and this makes impossible to use the concept of value. Can also highlight there's a lot of spelling mistakes in there, which kind of goes along with the message here, which makes it even better. But yes, this was the one I put up on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. It just there's just so much good stuff in there. Do you want to fire away first, mate?
Yeah, I mean, to to be fair with this comment, there are, there are some interesting discussion points here, and as kind of sort of ridiculous a rant as it sounds on the surface, there are kind of grains of truth. So again, saying you can't win if you build your own system. It's not impossible, but it is very very difficult. So
Yes.
I can understand where that kind of thought and sentiment comes from because
I will
uh,
interrupt you though. Maybe there's a difference between system with a Y and system with an I.
could be system. Yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not clever enough to build my own system, so I don't know. But in terms of, yeah, building a model, it's very hard work. There's a reason why a lot of people don't do it. Um, I notice a lot of kind of let's say tipsters, people who are asked that question about modeling. Um, I don't want to be cynical about it, but because a lot of the time they will say, no, it's kind of based on intuition or it's based on my knowledge. Um, where is it actually a case of maybe not having the understanding or the mathematical knowledge to do it? I freely admit, I don't have the knowledge. I would like to build more models. I kind of built kind of basic stuff, but I very much want to take a more data-driven approach and learn more on that side. So yeah, for me, I see a huge advantage with it. But again, you've seen models get outdated. They need constant updating and tweaking, and sometimes you could spend a long time building a model plus testing it, and by then you might find out it's not actually profitable necessarily, or the back testing you've done doesn't apply going forward. So that side of things is very tough. Well, what I will say is bookies do have more tolerance in general if you're originating your own lines, if you're kind of putting your own bets that aren't followed by a lot of people. You generally will get a bit more time. You'll still get restricted, you'll still have limits, but generally you'll get a fairer crack of the whip. So there is an incentive in that sense, to try and sort of think creatively or try to be original with your thinking and your bets. So I mean that's definitely the case. As for the PhD guys working for them, I don't have a PhD. I work in the industry. The barrier to entry is quite low. I know with my company and quite a few others, it's basically just have to be interested in sports, and even then,
Yeah.
you don't really have to necessarily be that interested in sports. If the jobs are going. So, if you're talking about, let's say, quants, people who are building the models themselves, yeah, you could definitely make that argument. But a lot of people on the trading floor who are kind of monitoring the markets, won't necessarily have that level of education or expertise. They don't need it, and the bookie industry is not one of the most well paid either. So people with those qualifications,
Mm.
unless they have a real passion for it, they'll be going into finance, they'll be going into other jobs in the corporate world, which pay better salaries, have better perks. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with that point. Um, yeah, I mean, in terms of following the favourites, I mean, you want to field
Yeah.
that one,
I
Alex?
mean, the first half is, yeah, you can have a bit of a give and take on that one, but the second half's not really. I mean, it's just an absolute load of garbage. But I will say, going on
Oh, I
from
was
what you just said about, sorry.
I thought I was supposed to be the bad cop.
Yeah, look, I'm sorry, mate. I've yeah. I mean, there's just some good stuff in here. This is probably one of the worst ones we've got, so it's easy to go in on this bloke. But I will go on from what you said about having PhD guys working for. Like, there's not like it's hard. Like you said, there's not much money in it for these guys, these really smart guys who can do other things to go and get in the betting industry. And it's also one of those things. I've got a friend who's been approached by bookmakers to go. He's got kind of like an economic commerce kind of background, and he's been approached by bookmakers to try and come and work for them. And not only is the money probably not going to be that great, but also it's a very niche industry, and it's also a frowned upon industry too. So if
Mm.
he worked at, let's just say, Bet365 for 5 years, and then he tried to get a job elsewhere, it's not the most like looked, favored industry in terms of your CV to go, oh great, he's worked in the gambling industry, etc. If you get what I mean. So not only is the pay probably not going to be that great, it's not exactly, yeah. What you said's right, mate. I mean, they may have PhD guys working for them, but it's probably like a very low number. And yeah, like you said, it's mostly just sports fans, who are, sure, there's some very smart guys in there, but generally, yeah, not the not the not the Tony Blooms of the world, you might want to say, that's behind the systems. Um,
Yeah, and I'd
yeah,
say that those kind of people would be working for syndicates rather than for bookmakers themselves.
because they can make way more money, like way more money. It's not
Yeah.
even close. Um, so yeah, that's that bit. I think we've covered that well. And then yeah, him saying never go against the odds and follow the favorites. I mean, sure, you can bet on the favorites as much as you want. You can bet on underdogs as much as you want. At the end of the day, the concept of value betting is not nonsense. And yes, you can calculate the true probability of an event. Sure, maybe you're not going to be able to calculate Arsenal winning this weekend perfectly. Maybe you're not going to be able to get them down to a 55.53% chance of winning. But bloody hell, you can get close. You can get down to a whole percent at least, or at least some of these really sharp guys can, to calculate the true probability of an event. Um, and as we know, value betting works if you can consistently beat the closing line, especially if we're talking about big leagues, um, where there's a shit ton of money coming in, and it's a very efficient line is created at the likes of Pinnacle. You take away the vig on that line. If you can beat that non-vig Pinnacle 1x2 Asian handicap over under line, you will be profitable long term. As long as you're beating it by a decent margin, you will be profitable long term. So I mean, we've talked about this a million times on the podcast, on this channel. I don't really. I mean, do you want to make any kind of case for this guy at all?
Well, I mean, the one thing, I mean, maybe I don't know if there's a translation issue, if that could be it, if it's kind of, maybe English isn't native language, so if there's some things in there that maybe are phrased differently. There's one thing I find interesting here as well is, following the odds favourites, because from what you've said, what we all agree is actually it's getting ahead of the odds rather than following the odds. So, you wanna be getting the bets on at the best price possible before they drop. So, I don't know if that was kind of part of the argument there, or I think that's
Mm,
important to say, because if you're just following steamers, which have already steamed, you're not gonna make any money.
yeah,
That's kind of very much
yeah,
the principle of what we try and do by value betting.
yeah. I mean, he kind of, I don't know. He kind of, yeah, it doesn't really make sense at all, to be honest. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're backing a favorite or an underdog. That essentially what you want to do is get value and beat the market's closing odds. So, um, mate, I think we can move on. See you later, mate. Oh, Wrong one. Where are we? I think this is the next one. Oh wait, no, this is the next one. There are some good ones in here, some quick ones. That was probably the longest one, so we can fire through these a bit more. How is it possible to make money without beating the closing line? Are we sure it's not just randomness? And I think I picked this one out because I thought it was just a good question, uh,
Yeah,
a rare
that's good.
good comment. I mean, yeah, rather than someone just giving someone shit, it was actually a productive question. So, yeah, go far away, mate.
Yeah, no, it is a good question, and I think, obviously closing value is extremely important, but there are markets where it's not as valid a metric. Again, if it's something liquid, if it's a big league, if it's something with a lot of money in the markets, then it's a good indicator. But then, to give you an example, some let's say prop bets that I do, which are becoming more liquid. Um, you can't always necessarily judge that. Let's say a bookmaker might move off a bet of yours, or off a small bet, in a small market. It's harder to judge. And again, if you're trading things in play as well, that data is not kind of freely available. So it's not necessarily sort of the be all and end all. It doesn't kind of cover everything, but obviously it's a very good way to measure, how you're going to be successful in the long run. And I think we've mentioned before. Again, there are some tipsters out there. There's well-known tennis tipster, I think Nishikori, who doesn't beat the closing line. There are
Yeah,
people out there who are still consistently profitable without doing it, which basically suggests they have a kind of an edge on the market, and an edge on market movement. And I think, if anything, that's a really interesting edge to have, because if one of the reasons you might get restricted again is by traders looking at your activity, and if you're beating starting prices or closing prices, and if you're not but you're winning, your account might be dismissed. So you can actually get some more longevity out
yeah.
of it. So I think that could actually end up being an advantage. So I think, yeah, it's a good question. But again, the randomness side of things, um, again, you need a big sample to kind of make a judgment call on that, and you know, the, the kind of statistical proof you need. So,
Mm.
yeah, it's a big question, hard one to answer. Those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the general theory is that if you're not beating the closing line, especially in a big league, you're not going to be profitable long term. But like you said, mate, there are certainly people out there that that cannot beat the closing line and win. But I think it's just all down to what's factored into the market. So if there's
Mm.
something that you don't think's factored into the market, that is, it's kind of irrelevant to whether you beat the closing line or not. If you're backing a team because, oh god, sorry, some spam emails coming up
What's
there.
your
Sorry, people.
first time
Yeah.
saying?
Oh, who knows, mate? I keep getting the anyway. I get spammed a lot. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah. So if there's something that you're looking at, let's just say, um, you think that you're betting on Arsenal, and you think the Arsenal's home new, vibrant atmosphere around the stadium is really, it's helping them out more than the odds are suggesting. Now that's going to be factored in, I know, but let's just say bookmakers fail to factor that in forever. You're probably just going to keep backing Arsenal every time they're at home, and maybe it'll never get factored into the line at all. That means you'll probably never beat the closing line, etc., etc. But you'll be profitable long term. So hopefully it's a terrible example because it would be factored into the odds. But if it wasn't and you weren't beating the closing line, then it doesn't really matter if you get closing line value or not, because the thing you're using that you think's important is not being factored into the line anyway. So I mean, smaller markets, your smaller leagues, your prop markets, closing line is probably not that relevant to those sports bettors. Like you said, tennis is a weird kind of sport where there's not much, there is a decent bit of liquidity around before the game starts, but also there's not as much time for sports
Mm.
bettors to I mean, I've had multiple guys on the podcast talk about tennis and why it's not efficient and all this kind of stuff. So you guys can go back and listen to those podcasts. But there's not much time between games. You've normally got, sometimes a day for people for these markets to mature, and that means they're just not going to be as efficient as they possibly could be. And then obviously you got your really small leagues like your who knows, Malaysian soccer league or whatever. Like, I could name some really low level leagues. They're just not going to be perfectly efficient because the limits are so low that the closing line is just, it's not probably not too relevant for you. So I think that mostly explains it, don't you think, mate? Is there any other examples you want to give of people who, potentially won't beat the closing line but will be profitable long term?
Yeah, no. I think that's very much it. I would say, again, people who let's say trading in play and kind of, closing positions, in games as well. That's harder to track. Yeah, like what you mentioned about things that aren't factored in as well. I know there's kind of some smart bettors in the US who look at weather conditions for baseball, for example, and there was an example. There was a bet I did. It was last season on. Sorry, at the end. Yeah, towards the end of last season, and it was on Liverpool and Villarreal. And again, it was kind of torrential rain throughout the day. It wasn't a match I was planning on betting on, but just I heard on the radio that that it was going to be absolutely soaking, and so I had to look at the spread lines for passes in the game, because obviously with the heavy pitch and a lot of rainfall, it was going to affect the kind of flow of the game. And it was a big win on that in the end. That was something, again, if I'd seen the passes market just before the game, it wouldn't have closed that far. I think the key for those kind of things is that, again, they don't attract the attention of big players in the market and big syndicates who will stake enough to move those lines. So you can still have that edge, but let's say your bets and others who are looking at it won't actually affect it. So that's another important factor to consider.
Yeah, no, well said. And I think most of these things that aren't factored into the line, if it's something that you're using week in, week out, it's profitable, like most likely eventually the market's going to pick up on it and your edge is gone. So like, for example, sport that I know well, like rugby, the rules changed in the NRL a couple of years ago where the game quickened up a lot more. So people were hitting the overs, probably hitting the favourites a bit more in terms of the line, getting bigger score lines and stuff like that. And, that edge was there for, I'd say, 2 weeks, and then it was gone. So, you can obviously factor things or you can obviously use things that are not factored into the market, but generally it's going to be factored in pretty quick. So, mate, next one. Winners don't sell picks. Keep that in mind on here. Bookies also ban them and move lines off them. If your source doesn't have that happen, they're usually a scam. Now, this is like, it's a half decent comment. I mean, once again, we're kind of working in absolutes here. Like, this guy's just basically saying all tipsters are not winners, which is, I'd probably say a lot of tipsters are not winners, probably generally. But at the end of the day, this is just a very one-sided comment. And yes, there are tipsters out there that obviously do make money for people. And yes, there are some that will lose money over and over and are scammers, will delete their Twitter accounts, make new ones, or make lots of Twitter accounts and see which one's going to be profitable, etc., etc. But I mean, the biggest thing with tipsters is that if they're really good, people are going to start following them. And then the more people that follow them, you won't be able to get the price. So when he says bookies ban them and then move lines off them, I mean, there is a slight bit of truth, I guess, in the fact that, eventually tipsters are going to get banned if they're good ones. And then if there's a load of people betting on one selection at one time, and the first account to Bettor was a guy that's got a 10% ROI at your book or whatever, then maybe track that for a couple of weeks and you see a common pattern, and probably everyone's going to get banned. So that's a fair comment. But to say that that winners don't sell picks, I mean, most of the time you would assume like your guys like Tony Bloom and Matthew Benham and these kind of guys, like the best of the best, they don't really need to sell picks because they're making so much money from sports betting themselves. It would just be the biggest waste of time for them ever. Whereas there's guys like myself, I was in the situation about a year ago. You're doing it too now. It's a good side income for sports bettors who at times write a lot of variance, maybe don't have the biggest bankroll in the world, can't make a huge amount of money just betting it themselves because they have a smaller bankroll and they're just one person. Whereas if they can sell their tips to people, they can make a nice little side income, which can either be put straight in their pocket or they could help supplement and build their bankroll themselves. So, sure, most tipsters might be not that great, especially these guys that just put their picks up on Twitter. Like, they're probably not that trustworthy, I would assume. But yeah, mate, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, 100% agreed with all of that. I think it's difficult, and you can see why a lot of people are skeptical because the problem with a lot of kind of tipsters, the betting Twitter world is it's not regulated. You can kind of claim whatever you want. Like you said, people making multiple accounts and just seeing which one ends up in profit. People faking bet slips. I mean, there's a website where you can sort of fake, your Betfair profit and loss and all this kind of stuff. And you can see why people are skeptical. But I think, yeah, it is a strange thing. And I've heard this, and it's kind of a cliche where people say, oh, well, if you're winning, why do you need to have a group? Why do you need to do all this? But yeah, like you say, it's not everyone has, a six-figure bankroll, and you've got to start somewhere. And there are a lot of incredibly smart people that I know, who do this as a side income. They have a job, they have other commitments, but in terms of scaling up to a level that they want, it's very difficult, especially if your edge is at soft bookmakers, and again, you're restricted or constantly restricted. Again, some people might not be able to get a hold of accountants anymore. I'm kind of fed up with that, but they still have a skill that they want to use and they utilize. And why not? For me personally, again, I can run a group, and hopefully I'll get some members once it goes paid. But as long as I've been able to get the bets on myself, I'm happy with the stakes I'm putting on. Why not? I can share it to others, and hopefully the prices hold, and they're able to make a bit of money as well, get to help a few people, make a bit of extra cash for not a huge amount more work than I'm already doing. I think that's key as well. Like, with a lot of top tipster services, it is, it's a nice extra income, for doing what you're doing. And also, one advantage I can definitely say with my group is, making contact with lots of interesting people, the networking side of things. You end up, meeting lots of interesting people who can help you, and vice versa in your betting. So I don't think it's as simple as just saying that, winners don't sell picks. Yeah, obviously, if you're making a huge amount of money, it's kind of not really worth the time and hassle. But let's say, for example, someone like Psychoff, I don't know, but he will obviously charge a high premium for his courses, probably because he either doesn't need to do it, or some people would say, well, maybe it's to give the illusion, of kind of that superior level of quality at that price. I wouldn't want to say, I haven't done the course, so but yeah, so that could be one example as well. If you're you know, what you feel your time is worth. So at the moment, we do. Maybe once both of us sort of make our millions, we might not have a group anymore. But you know, so but for the time, so yeah, I think that's one thing. Yeah, what we touched on before about bookies banning, you know, you for following tipsters. Yeah, 100% they do. That's why it's important to try and originate some of your own things. Try and learn to develop some of your own strategies, or find your own bets. Because if you mix them in with, you know, you can follow tipsters, put tipster bets in there, and you know, mix them in with other stuff, and then again that can prolong your account life. So it's not be all and end all, but if all you're doing is just, you know, following these tipster picks, then it's difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah, something you didn't say, but you said as well. Again, it's important is if there's a lot of people in a group, then you know, will the prices hold. You do want to be looking at if there's a cap on numbers in groups, and I think, you know, some of the better tipsters around, that's a good sign, a good indicator that actually they're conscious of what they're doing, and their the price
Mm,
movements, and want to actually give a, you know, decent service to their
yeah.
customers. You know, 'cause there's free groups out there with like 10,000 people in them, you know, sending out prop bets, and the information is good, but obviously if you're 2 minutes late, it's just a
Yeah.
waste of time. And yeah, like all of this stuff, it's just uh, there's a lot of kind of strong opinions, kind of matter of fact statements here that we're going through, and it's never quite as simple as you know,
No.
just one side or the other.
Yeah. And to say that they're a scam just because their lines aren't moving, well, I mean, for one, you can check and see, all right, does this person have closing line value? Sure, it might be a little bit, you know, messed with because, you know, if there's thousands of people betting the one selection, then the market might be quite skewed. But if it's a big enough market, then it won't matter because it'll get bet back the other way if it's not a good selection. So um, if they're betting into bigger markets, you don't have to you don't have to worry if they're a scam or not. You can just go and check and see if they're getting closing line value. And if they're betting into smaller markets, sometimes, like, I know that a lot of my UFC prop bets, like the line, they just won't. These bookies are just lazy. Like, they won't change their number on some of these prop bets because there's bigger markets, more important markets like Premier League markets, except like money line markets that they need to move, you know, first over a prop market where there's not as much volume. So I know a ton of bookmakers that literally, is whatever prices they put up on a Friday for their UFC bets on the weekend, it stays that the whole way through. So yeah, I think like what you said before is perfect. Like, just you can take this comment either way, half of it being true, half of it not. But at the end of the day, there's just no absolutes in anything. Like, we just need to like relax a bit and realize that basically everything in life is can be debated either way, and no one's right or wrong. There's no like 100% right. Um, Obviously, in some topics, there's 100% right, but like in topics like this, it's all debatable, and it's always somewhere in the middle. Maybe lean slightly to one side, but yeah, we just a lot of opinionated people out there, mate. They just need to relax and be a bit more either side, don't they, mate?
I think yeah, the sort of the betting space attracts this kind of very strong opinions, I think, shall we
Mm,
say, or if not downright abuse sometimes. I think there's something peculiar to betting. I don't know, the kind of, you know, the, you know, some of the anger, sort of some of the stuff that people, you know, who've lost, or a lot of people who call out others, in quite a harsh way, and yeah, I suppose I can understand it. I just think it's a shame, really. There's space for, you know, like I'm happy for you when you do well. It's not a reflection on me. You know, I'm happy for my friend. You know, if they're doing
yeah,
well and they're even if I've had a shit week, I'm kind of all right. I'll be like, yeah, well done, mate. But I'm still happy for you. But and I've never really understood that. You know, there can be lots of people in this space doing well, sharing
yeah,
information, and without having to kind of resort to personal attacks, and that does, maybe it's just a feature of Twitter in general, but it does kind of get
Mm.
thrown up a lot in betting circles.
And generally, these people that are yeah, attacking you personally or are really going in on what you're saying, they normally are not, you know, the great. Like they probably don't have much of a life. So yeah,
Well,
I
yeah,
normally just try and picture someone, yeah, sitting behind a computer, eating lots of food, and yeah, I just try and picture a loser basically. Sorry for all those people who likes eating food behind their computer.
don't worry, I sit behind my desk and eat as well.
Yeah, I do too. I shouldn't be. Guess I'm a loser. All right, let's brighten the mood here. These are some good ones. All right, this is just people just having a crack at us personally, mate. So I can go first. It is impossible to understand one word. Your accent is terrible. It's terrible with a 2 in the middle. So that's maybe your spelling's pretty terrible, mate. So jog on.
I mean, we said there's no my sort of statements here, but that's yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh no, this is my favorite. This is my favorite.
All right. Excuse me if I allow myself. I mean, this is just such a great start. Can you please can you please speak more understandable English? This is referring to myself, of course. Most of the things you say I don't understand, and it doesn't happen often. You go too fast and you eat your words. Thanks. I mean, I can understand. I mean, yeah, I've got no problems with this message. I actually just think it's absolutely hilarious, mate. Do you have any tips for me myself on how I can improve my English?
Yeah, just emigrate. No, I mean, I think you've been pretty clear. I don't know. I mean, it's just one guy. Maybe he's got a thing against Aussies.
Yeah, I can understand. If you're not a English speaker, I probably say some things that don't make sense, or I speak too quickly. Quickly, I don't know. Who knows?
Well, see, because I grew up watching like Neighbours and Home and Away, so I just heard like Australian accents like my whole childhood.
Yeah.
So whenever sort of I hear an Aussie, it's quite easy to understand. But there you go. There's some advice. Why don't you like Neighbours is finished now? Sadly, it's ended its run. But if you want to go through the back catalogue of Neighbours,
Yeah,
maybe that might help you understand Alex a bit better and other Australians.
yeah.
So I'd recommend that.
I did used to live with a few Italian people, and they really. I had to really dumb it down for them. Really speak very slowly, so they could understand me. So maybe this bloke's Italian or girl's Italian. I've got no idea.
So what about eating your words? I mean,
yeah, look, I eat a lot of things, mate, but I certainly don't eat my words. All right, mate. And then for you, oh, sorry, not very good at this, am I? So this is more of a personal insult. You are a spoofer. This is your video.
Yeah, I didn't know what this meant. Basically, what, like a scammer or?
I didn't know what it meant until a couple of months ago. But spoofer, I believe it means, yeah, you're basically a scam. Like whatever tip you gave out or whatever, you're just they're having. You've got no idea, essentially, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I respond to this. The thing is, if you start going into it, it just sounds like.
Give me a bet history right now, mate. That's what we need right now.
Yeah, what do you want? Do you want my bank card, mate? Do you want do you want to see? Do you want the logins for all my betting accounts? I mean, how am I supposed to prove this to you? You just kind of have to take it on my word, I guess. But yeah, I could be. There's no reason, it's easy enough to do. You just have to think. I mean but this kind of relates to, again, so how do you trust the information that's out there? I think if people have listened to sort of the podcasts I've done or articles I've written or just had any interaction with me in general, I think I'd like to think they think I'm sincere. If anything, I might not be the best gambler in the world or just the smartest guy, but definitely one thing I'd say is that I try to live with integrity and be honest. I wouldn't be putting information out there if it wasn't true. I think what to be fair, so obviously we started Trademate journey, right? And that was, on your suggestion, we kind of trace how my sort of journey began,
Yeah.
and look, we got off to a great run, right? And I think that can kind of be annoying. I've been in that situation where I've seen services, say, oh, they've done amazing, and I've just signed up, and the month I sign up, everything tanks, or I try the same thing and it just doesn't work, and I don't make any money from it. So I can kind of understand that perspective, that and this has happened with friends of mine. Let's be kind of really open about it. We've talked about it on Trademate. We've looked at sort of different filters and the variants that you can start off and you can have a bad month when you first start. It just so happened that I got off to a flying start,
Yeah.
and it was kind of a long time after we did the series that I've kind of gone on a bad run. But I have mentioned it podcast. I'm not necessarily hiding that information. I just think at this point, there's probably not much value or interest in kind of continuing that series. I suppose we could do in the future. Like I'm happy to show people that. But yeah, it's a fair point. Sometimes you think, yeah, is it too good to be true? What how are people sort of doing this? But yeah, I don't think I'm a spoofer, but I don't know how I can convince this person either. So what's the catch? Well, there's no catch. It's just obviously we're promoting a service that that you pay for, which is good value, I think, for what you get, and that's it. The content is out there just to promote it, to give people an insight, give some education. All these podcasts you do, there's no catch to them. 153 episodes now, right, of free content for people who want to improve their betting. I think from the same company, that we were doing these promo videos for. I think that shows a level of integrity, honesty and trust. If that doesn't convince you, nothing will, mate, to be honest.
Yeah, I think if you're educated enough in sports betting and you know what's profitable, what's not, what works, all this kind of stuff, when you've done it for long enough and you've educated yourself, if you just listen to someone talk for like over a couple of minutes and you've done like hours and hours of content on this channel and other places too, you can pick up pretty quickly whether a guy's just full of shit or he's actually knows what he's talking about. Like it's not, especially when people are doing live streams and stuff like that. Like you can't edit that. That's just all live out there. Like going off exactly what I'm thinking at that moment, getting asked questions. So like you've done loads of that stuff too. So mate, I don't think we need to defend you at all. I think it's pretty clear, mate. But yeah.
I did have another someone sort of in another group I was in say that I was feeding my ego. So if anyone's seen my Twitter, there's a little quote in there.
Yes, I saw that.
Because I was kind of doing a group and someone accused me of sort of stealing their information or tips, which were kind of really available and kind of wildly inaccurate, some of the things he said. So yeah, that was another one. I've been pretty lucky so far. I haven't had sort of too many things, and sort of no one's had a go at me eating my words yet. But I'm sure when I go premium, there will be sort of more spotlight on there if things don't go well. But it's kind of comes with the territory, really. I think that's also maybe good advice for anyone sort of thinking about doing that kind of thing or getting involved in the betting spaces, to kind of not let these things get you down. There are always going to be people who just sort of, and some people just do it to troll you. They don't actually care one way or another.
Probably,
they're just wind up merchants, and so you just kind of don't give them the time, but don't get defensive either. Just kind of politely sort of engage in it. Don't engage in it. Ignore it. And just carry on, just have faith in what you're doing. There's always going to be haters out there. I've always gone by the philosophy that if you don't have any haters, you're probably not doing. If you've got a few, you're doing something right. Because there are just people who are just naturally jealous or just want to bring you down in life, and you just have to kind of cut interactions with those kind of people to a minimum.
Beautifully said, mate. All right, next one. Dear Trademate Sports, this is a good comment, by the way. Actually, a good question we can answer. Would placing bets on 1.5 odds reduce variance? What would be the potential downsides to that? Much obliged. Well, Yes, it definitely would. If you're, I mean, the lower end odds you're betting, as long as there's value, of course. If the true odds are 1.45 and you're betting at 1.5, generally there will be less variance. There'll also just be less variance on anything where you've got a bigger edge. So you're going to get more variance if the true odds is 1.48 compared to if the true odds are 1.4 or 1.35, something like that. So, yes, definitely, you're going to get less variance the lower in odds you go. Potential downsides to betting on that odds range. I mean, potentially the edges won't be as big. I mean, it's hard to always judge, but generally, or a lot of the time, it's going to be hard to find massive edges in that kind of odds range, just because a lot of bookmakers will quote similar odds in that kind of range. Whereas if you get a little bit higher into like your 2.1s, 2.2s, maybe up towards 3, you can get some bigger kind of differences there sometimes. And yeah, I don't know, if you're not staking appropriately, there could be some really big swings too. Just if you're not consistent with your staking, but I think that's kind of similar wherever you go. But I think maybe the biggest downside is if you're just betting on lower odds just to reduce your variance and you're not placing value bets, then you're going to lose long term. So, any thoughts on that, mate?
Yeah, I would say maybe other downsides to that are also would be in terms of bankroll growth. That your growth will obviously be a bit slower potentially, because you're not winning much on each bet. So if you have a losing run of a few bets on that, it takes longer to recover at those kind of odds. And so in some ways, and again, you need to be sort of staking accordingly to do it. So that would definitely be a factor as well. And yeah, exactly like you said, in terms of sort of the edge you're taking, kind of the odds will be similar. So a few ticks here or there between different bookmakers. So it might be harder to take that kind of thing. So so that's definitely part of it. So yeah, you're going to get more likelihood of sort of long winning runs, less likelihood of long losing runs, but ultimately, again, it depends on your risk tolerance for that kind of thing, because you're not going to be getting those kind of big wins. So me personally, but again, it's just preference. It's not a right or wrong way to do things, because plenty of successful people who do that. So someone, a friend of the podcast, Marco here, he has a kind of specific odds range for most of the bets that he does. Again, to kind of reduce the variance and the risk, but also that's where he's found his strongest edges are. Let's say around 1.8 to evens mark. But yeah, for me, I like the big wins. I like the kind of the roller coaster of it. What would annoy me more is if I lost like 3 1.5 shots in a row. That would really piss me off. Whereas I'm happy to lose. Well, not happy, but I can tolerate losing like 10, 15, 20 horses at 20-1, because that is to be expected for that kind of strategy. So I think it just speaks more to your mindset really, because one thing is flattening the variance and reducing that, but ultimately, what's your goal? Do you want to be sort of betting sort of full time professionally? Is this a kind of side income? Do you need kind of it to be fairly steady each month, or are you going to be looking at it? For me, for example, I will look at it quarters or a kind of yearly take, rather than be too focused on each month. So I think it's kind of more of a question about mindset, really, because again, people like to bet on kind of shorter odds favourites a lot of the time. A lot of mug punters, it's very popular to do that. It goes back to the question we had in the beginning, again, so betting on favourites. But sometimes sometimes you'll just look at a game and look at a team and you think, what, they're just really strong, and maybe you don't bet that often. So you might, I don't know, bet on Bayern or Liverpool, maybe not the greatest example at the moment, but you bet on one of these teams, PSG, And probably, with a bit of luck, you'll be up over the season without actually following a proper process, but kind of taking these kind of short odds. So yeah, there's a lot to it. I think there's downsides to any approach. There's pros and cons to each.
Yeah.
But if you know that you're kind of you're kind of risk averse, you don't like these kind of long, you don't enjoy these long losing runs, and you want to have a kind of steady sort of win rate, then yeah, it would make sense to bet those kind of odds.
Yeah, I will mention there's a really good article on the Trademate blog called "How to Reduce Your Variance." So I'd give that a read. There's millions of examples in there of ways you can do it, but I think generally, mate, you're better off spending your time finding edge over edge rather than spending your time trying to reduce your variance. And you need to also spend time getting used to variance, read about it a little bit more, and just spend time, just get used to long winning runs and long losing runs. Like, that's one of the biggest things you need to get used to, especially if you want to take this seriously, is that it's just a part of it, and it's not something I just think you're better off spending more time either learning about variance or finding more edges rather than trying to just reduce your variance, because no matter what you do, you're always going to have variance. So there's you can probably go down a long spiral of trying to reduce your variance, and maybe it'll help a little bit, but at the end of the day, if you're good at finding long odd selections and finding massive edges there, you're better off doing that and getting used to the variance rather than going away from your strengths and potentially becoming a losing sports bettor. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing to do, would be to just to have a high volume of bets. That's probably the best way to do it. If you're putting on really high volume of bets at those kind of odds, then that'll kind of flatten it out. So yeah, that's what I really think.
Cool, mate. All right, now we are on to you've sent me some tweets, I believe, that that you wanted to go through. I think these are they all from the same person, mate, or are they all different?
There's a couple from the same person, yeah, and there's a few interesting ones that he posted, but they kind of illustrate the same point.
I'm not sure if I've got them all in the right order, but I'll see if I'll bring this one up first, and you let me know if this is in the right order. It says, hello, betting companies are not our friends. Let's not get jealous when one punter wins. Let's not fight amongst one another, but instead learn the market strategies, and let's rejoice when your slips come through. Most importantly, let's not fake it. Get in there.
Yeah, I love this because it's kind of speaks to what we're talking about, the kind of poison of betting Twitter and sort of, people just having a go at each other, or kind of just sort of jealous of each other's success. And it's true, it's kind of like we're all essentially after the same thing. We want to beat the bookmakers, make a little nice side income for ourselves. So, you just kind of give credit where credit's due to people who are doing well. See if there's anything they're willing to share or to learn from, and yeah, absolutely, just kind of learn. Right, how do you do that? I think there's a difference between sort of people who just post up these sort of green screens and winning slips and don't actually explain what they've done, or not willing to kind of share any information. That's their choice if they don't want to share anything. But I think if you're sharing a kind of winning bet slip, you obviously there's a reason you're doing that. But you can see why it would rub people up the wrong way if that's all you do is just post winning slips. I had an idea. I probably mentioned it. I might have mentioned it before, but just a little project to actually just put up losing slips and just constantly put up losing slips, but to put with that the reasoning why I thought it was a good bet, but it lost. And again, sort of to see what kind of interest that would actually get. Probably not a lot, but it's kind of reverse of what you see a lot of the time happening. But yeah, like you said,
that's a great idea. I like that.
Yeah, let's see. Maybe I'll start it off when I do my group as part of the promo. I'll just put like the best losing bet of the week or something, as as my sort of
Yeah.
share on Twitter and see what that does. Probably, yeah.
I might start
Um,
doing that. I quite like that. I'd honestly rather give myself shit than promote myself. I find that so much more comfortable in doing. I honestly, I
yeah,
cannot stand people that put up that they just backed a winner uh, or put up winning slips. I mean, it really just gives me the shits. Like I seriously don't care if you want to bet. Like I really don't care.
yeah, like people who've won like a 1.8 shot and they put about 50 bomb emojis and like boom this and like, all right, mate, just calm down. You won like a tenner, like just chill out.
Yeah.
But each their own. But I think
What I will say though to this tweet, to go slightly against it, is that we are kind of fighting against each other. I know I'm not saying we should be fighting amongst each other and be giving each other shit or whatever. I am saying that as sports bettors, you are fighting against each other because you're placing bets into a market that moves. So, for example, if you're all 100 people follow a whiz bang tipster who's posting up pinnacle prices, limits are only a couple of $100, let's just say. As soon as he puts up that bet, it is a race to pinnacle, and there will only be one winner. There will only be one winner, and everyone else loses because they will get a worse price as pinnacle will move their price. So, in that sense, yes, you are fighting against each other, but there are ways to fight against each other. You can just fight against each other via bets, not giving people shit and whatever. If you get what I mean.
yeah, no. I think that's a great point. I think there's a phrase for it. The sort of tragedy of the commons, I think it's called. Like, yeah, so kind of essentially is how we almost like incentivize, the way things are set up, and again, in this betting space, there's limited liquidity, right? So, like you say, you've got to be, the early bird catches the worm. You've got to be trying to be first to a lot of these markets. So that's definitely a valid point. But I think there is room enough for people to be doing similar things and still be able to get a slice of the pie. Obviously, at the top end, that's more difficult. But between each other, you're still able to, or again within the same space, you're doing different things, right? So, let's say you're specialist in UFC. For someone who doesn't actually even follow UFC, but to give you shit for the winning bet slip on that, it has nothing really to do with what they're doing. If they're betting on football or
Yeah.
something else, totally different market, totally different approach and process. Let's say I do horse racing and golf, for example, but in a different way to maybe other tipsters who do it, but in a similar way to other punters. There'll be like probably thousands of other people across the country doing similar bets to myself. So um, yeah, there's just room in the space, I think, to just be more constructive and ask questions. If you see these bet slips, I need to do more of this myself rather than just sort of I'll just sort off. Just actually message sometimes like, all right, okay, yeah, well done, like it was a good bet. Like why did you choose it? What was your thinking behind the bet? And see, sometimes you'll be able to tell from people that actually they might put it up. I think some people genuinely want to educate others in this space, and then there's some who just kind of do it for the attention. So I suppose unless you ask those kind of questions, you won't know, which camp they're in.
Yep. Love it, mate. Love it. All right. Another one from yourself. This is I think it's a two-parter. So I believe this is the first part. Yeah, every single tipster on here claims to be consistently profiting from betting. If that was the case, why do they need your money, and why would they give their edge away to their own detriment? Truth is, they're all complete dog shit and need your money to fund their losses. Fact. So many tipsters on here have a cult-like following. It's bizarre. Even when they're leading their sheep to the poorhouse, from consistently losing tips, you see replies like, "We move on, bro, and you'll turn this around." Never happens. Tipsters are guessers with oversized egos, mate. I mean, we've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but yeah, I guess this is where you got your name or your Twitter bio about having an inflated ego.
No, it wasn't actually this person, but I do like this Twitter account. There's lots of strong opinions on here on a kind of constant basis, and it's one of those where you kind of the more you're kind of engaged or criticise, it's one of those people where they kind of enjoy the negative attention and kind of say, oh, well, if you're living rent free in my head, or you're kind of you're wasting all this time worrying about me when I'm not even thinking about you, and it's kind of like, oh god. So yeah, there is a point. There is a good point in here, sort of mixed in with the kind of aggression. There's this kind of cult-like following that he talks about. It's a good point. There are a lot of
Yeah,
tipsters out there who, whether or not intentionally or not, or if it's a product of just their membership not wanting to lose face, um, people will kind of come to their defense, or they'll justify, why they might be losing, and not necessarily question the credentials of the service or the tipster, or whether it actually works. And it's a bizarre sort of aspect of human behavior, really, kind of maybe not wanting to admit defeat, and from the tipster side, maybe a lack of kind of accountability and transparency. But there is a kind of balance as well. So you don't want to be apologizing sort of if you have a bad week, or a bad day. I have done it on occasion, but that's kind of maybe more out of frustration. But it's a fine balance, because occasionally I will say, look, I hold my hands up. I probably made a mistake with this bet, or maybe I was didn't factor this in or that. But if you're saying that all the time, then that will raise question marks about your process. But if you never say it either, and you get defensive about any criticism, then it's hard to kind of engage with that. And I think there's a lot of room for that. So to kind of follow people who are quite, let's say, stubborn and don't want to change their process or learn anything new or adapt, that personally for me would be off-putting. I don't want to be, let's say, labelled and like that myself. So it's a fine balance. So it's tricky. I don't know. I suppose, especially when you were running your service as well, and sometimes if there'd be a difficult, a tough card, you feel bad. You feel bad for the members, or at least if you're a decent person, you do. But at the same time, it is kind of part of it. So you're trained to understand that kind of variance, and you're used to it. But then when it comes to other people in your group who have that frustration, it's that added pressure, isn't it? Just kind of, you feel bad for them. You feel a bit apologetic, but then you don't want to be sort of profusely apologetic every time, because then they're like, well, why'd you make bets?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing worse than losing other people money. But I think, I think also on Twitter, there are people that are just like, they love a community, and they're happy to put up bets and have some fun, and maybe they shouldn't advertise. Maybe they should state more clearly that they're not like a profitable sports bettor. They just like love this community and love having a bit of fun, and people, people follow people who put out good, fun, entertaining content. But there's obviously like a clear division there between actually being a good bettor and doing it for entertainment. So, yeah, I mean, if you're doing it for fun, maybe state that a little bit more clearly. But yeah, there are obviously, guys out there who are, who do a good job, and some that don't. It's just like, once again, it's all in absolutes, really. You're either on one side or the other, clearly. And I think that the reason why people are like that is just because, it's not entertaining, really, to say, tipsters are generally, they're fine. Here are some things that maybe to look out for. It's not very entertaining. It's way more entertaining to say, tipsters are scammers, the worst things that ever, entered this earth. or to be on completely the other side and to be like, what's going to get impressions, what's going to get views, what's going to get people riled up. I mean, a tweet like this, essentially what this guy wants is comments.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can
He
see,
wants
what's got like, a fair amount of comments, retweets, and
Yeah.
58 likes on that comments. Obviously, lots of people who agree with it.
Yeah.
Let's say like this podcast, it was like we were sort of debating. I was saying, we could kind of do it on, sports betting trolls, right? If you'd called this podcast something else, if you called, I don't know, like sports tipster scammers, it probably would get a lot more views, but it's not what you're after, like it's not the kind of audience necessarily, that would, appreciate the content that we, and what we're trying to achieve. So, again, it's a lot of it is for attention, for likes, kind of clickbait, or part of this kind of Twitter culture, really.
Yeah, mate. We've got one more here. If you want to quickly run through it as we're running, we are going a bit long here. Maybe you want to explain this one because I'm a bit confused by what's.
This was just a kind of tweet, just kind of going through betting Twitter, and I really like this account because what they do is, I think they may have their own service. I'm not, or may used to have had their own service. But what they do is kind of they look at other tips or accounts, and you can see. So if you're just listening and not viewing this, so it says, apologies all. I've noticed the lifetime total tips for blah 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 service had data from a previous version, and then what they've put is the number of tips and the ROI, and then in brackets. This is what I like, is that they've actually kind of broken this down, that this tips' results are 1 in 3 billion chance that they're due to luck.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I think this is what I quite like, is because you can look at headline ROI figures, you can look at, again, like points profit, all of this kind of stuff. Someone can say, oh, they've been profitable for 2 years. That's all great. And, a lot of the time, maybe they are, they are good tipsters, they're genuine. I can say that about myself. I've only been going since May, done close to 1,000 bets. So, I like the way that he kind of frames it, and in a way to say to yourselves, look, do your own analysis as well. Have a look into this, and okay, like how much of it could be down to luck? Because if you're saying to me it's a 1 in 2 million chance, then pretty much nailed on. Look, they've got a good process. They're doing something right. So I think this was kind of my positive betting Twitter, because I think this is a nice way to approach things, an intelligent way to look at who to follow, and to do it in a kind of a smart
Maybe
way.
you want to give him a shout out.
I can't remember who it is. Can you block it out? I will. I'll put it in the comments when I do find it.
Yeah, righto. Sorry about that, mate. I assumed everything you sent me was negative, so I just blocked it out. So sorry, mate. You just missed out on some promo, but that's all right. I'm sure it'll be fine. All right, mate. Well, I think that's us. That was pretty fun. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, hopefully something interesting. Be good to get some comments on this one. I think there's something. Hopefully we'll.
That'd be great.
Well. So
when we just got more content, we can just keep recycling over and over. We can comment on the.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, we could do a part 2. So if anyone's got any more, good gambling Twitter, stuff, send us screenshots. We can go through some of those as well.
I could do this every week, mate. It's an absolute pleasure, especially the ones that insult me about my speaking. That's or my English.
Yeah, any more insults for Alex? How we can improve, not eating his words so much. Very well.
Yeah, I'm a hungry man, mate. All right, you can find Neel on Twitter at MyBettorLife, and I believe you will have your service details up there starting in about 3 or 4 weeks. So. Come check in in November, beginning of November. We'll be going live, but it is free for the next few weeks. So get in touch if you do want to get any tips before then. Good stuff, mate. And you can follow me at @AlexVilla_. No UFC this week, but next week I'll be back. Not on this channel, but if you're following some of the other channels I do content for, check out my Twitter and you'll see some of the content I am doing around that week to week. But thanks for listening, everyone. I will please make sure you do a quick rate and review of the podcast and subscribe to us wherever you listen to the podcast. And next episode will be next week, probably Thursday or Friday. And I just finished interviewing a couple of pro sports bettors out of Canada, Mitch and Tyrus, little pro betting partnership they got themselves there. So that was an interesting chat. Don't think they've done any interviews on any other platform. So some new people for you guys there. And I hope you enjoy that podcast. Pleasure catching up with you, mate. And I'll see you soon, probably.
Yeah, brilliant as always. Nice one, Alex.